Welcome to Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary podcast. This is your host, Scotty B. She once said, "You never have to ask permission to follow your dreams." With that in mind, I'm convinced there's nothing my next guest can't do. She balances competition with curating content, working out, and the day-to-day without missing a beat. From Dragon Ball to the Sinestro Corps, there's no limit to her creativity, passion, and artistic ability to create these characters and bring everything to life. A talent in every aspect. Please welcome the award-winning ChelseaM Cosplay.
Hello, Scotty. Thank you for having me. It's
Yes,
probably
thanks.
probably the nicest introduction I have ever gotten.
Well, it's well deserved. You've done so many different things with cosplay, and it's just amazing. Going all the way back to 2015. I know we have a lot of things to talk about today. I'm very excited to get into that, and I am going to I'll have a few things to say, but I'm going to let you loose on anything and everything that you want to talk about, because I think it's just a marvelous amount of creativity and work. I can see in the background you have something that you're working on there. It's
Yeah.
just so cool. So I go back to, well, I think we probably go back even further, probably to like 2008 would be kind of where you started with
As far
cosplay.
as as competition, I haven't been competing that long. This year is actually only my third year competing, but in May it's my fifth anniversary as a cosplayer.
Wow. So back in 2015, you were at Comic Palooza.
Yes.
And you did a World of Warcraft Pocahontas, um, and we first see that build I think on Instagram back a while ago. Um, Super complicated from just looking like everything that I looked at. An armor build with EVA foam, was like plasti dipped, aged, detailed, painted. Did all the makeup, hair, everything just looked so awesome. It was really cool. But a huge undertaking. And I guess that's where I'll start, but I will let you explain if you want to take us through the process and just kind of go through how you got to that point and how it was.
Okay. Well, I didn't actually know anything about cosplay until I went to college and I met a, a fellow artist going through the Lamar art program with me. He's also a cosplayer and prop maker. You can find him online at underscore zip tie. And I really couldn't afford to do anything at that time because I was a poor college student.
Mhm.
But conventions and cosplay never left me because I've been obsessed with comic books before I even held one. I was like, I want to read comic books.
Mhm.
And um, at some point, I really want to make my own comic book too. But that obsession, it just stayed with me. And I graduated in 2012 with a fine arts degree. And I couldn't find a job because I just had freelance experience. There was no people when I went to apply for the job, they couldn't see any real world application for my degree. And it's hard to get into an industry that's art related if you don't have a whole lot to show. And that's where I was at. And so
Mhm.
I ended up couch surfing from one couch to another, ended up moving about 15 times in the span of like 5 to 7 years. Um, and in about 2015, early 2015, I was on the verge of being homeless, and I was getting to the point where I was going to have to quit everything art related that I was trying to do. Um, and I was in the mental space of, okay, well, I have this job that I'm going to on a day-to-day basis. What can this money get me? And I was gonna have to sleep in my car and have a cheap gym membership to take a bath and move from place to place so that I wouldn't get arrested and stuff. Like I had a whole like plan in my head about how this was going to happen. Um, and I decided I saw that they were having a comic palooza, and I was like, I have like $50, and I have enough money to get into the con, so I might as well. If I'm going to end up living in my car for a while, like at least I'll have something in there with me that shows that I actually made something. Like I pursued this
Mhm.
dream, I tried, and I might be homeless, but I have this wonderful thing, right? And they have free blogs for blogspot.com, so I quickly just set up this blog and had this poll and let people vote on a costume that I had gone and I had looked up all these artists artists that I really liked their stuff and did this poll. And the one that won was Warcraft Pocahontas by this artist named Liber Libellula. I can't remember her real name right now, but she had wonderful art, and I didn't know anything about cosplay, like making costumes, so I
Mhm.
had to watch a bunch of tutorials and research what EVA foam was for like weeks before I was even comfortable um, buying foam because there's just so many types of foam, and if you get the wrong one, you can make it work, but it's easier if you have the EVA closed cell foam. And I ended up finding a big, like 4 by 9 foot sheet of it, and it was enough. I knew that it was enough that if I messed up once, I could start over and it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Mhm.
Um, but I had watched so many tutorials and stuff that by the time I decided to like actually start building, I knew everything that could go right and everything that could go wrong, and I was prepared to fix it. Um,
Wow. So you spent a lot of time doing the research, and you're self-taught, which is amazing. That and you haven't. I mean, at no point did you ever feel like you were gonna give up. Like this wasn't like. I mean, as low as things can get, and I know I've been there myself. And someone that I always reference as far as when you get to that point where you are kind of borrowing some space from someone on a couch, Lewis Howes always comes to mind. Lewis Howes is amazing. He went from zero to having this awesome podcast and online program. I always bring him up because he's very inspiring. He was an arena football player for a while and hit rock bottom and started all over again. So it's always so inspiring to hear that you created that, like you took what you had where you were and you turned it into this just amazing thing, and still and you found passion with it.
mhm. And my sister, my twin, actually, Cynthia, was really supportive of me at the time. Um, Knew that what the situation was, but couldn't really offer me anything besides emotional support. And she was just like, "Yeah, you can do it." And I was like, "Yeah, I know I can. I feel it as like it's my only chance, and I'm gonna do it. Um, Even if I end up like living on the streets, I will have done this thing,
Hmm.
and it will never leave me because it will always be there." And because she's done that for me, I'm also there for her now when she's starting her own like essential oil business. You can find it on Instagram at Essential Being Co. Where she is actually helping people now with this coronavirus thing, um, selling Thieves Shield, which is like an antibacterial that you can mix with a water or vinegar, or if you are stressed out at night and you can't sleep, there's lavender and you can put it in your bath or spray it on your pillow, and it just stress relieving. And I think
Hmm.
she helped me whenever I was stressed, and now I can like help her now because I went through all of this stuff, and she's actually the one that helped me get my full-time job right now. It was online on southeasttexas.com, and she was like, "Here, I found this, go apply for it." And I applied for it, and I forgot about it and just became obsessed with making my costume. And then the next thing, I was going to school to become a certified nurse aide because I was like, if none of this pans out, I'll be able to do certified nurse aide and help people um, while I'm homeless, right? I'll be able to do some good. And so I told everyone, I told everyone, I was like, I'm gonna get the certified nurse aide certificate. They're gonna hand me the certificate, and somebody's gonna call me with a job offer, and that's exactly what happened. And so that wouldn't have happened without my sister. And so I think my sister and me just being passionate about the cosplay is one of the reasons that I got hired, because it brought out just like everything that I wanted to be. And that would, without all that hardship, I wouldn't have made it to that point.
Well, and you have such great focus, from everything that I've observed. Is once you set your mind to something, that is what you are doing, and you have such a great way of bringing the idea to life. So whether it's with regular work or whether it's with cosplay, one thing that I have heard you, or that you said just with us messaging back and forth about the show, was that you tend to stay up pretty late to work on your cosplays.
Yes.
So if you want to like talk about the discipline that goes into, and like your regime, for lack of a better term, like how do you stay on pace, and how do you deal with, everybody calls it the con crunch. Are you at that point? Are you like 24/7, like, oh, I'm getting this done, or are you pretty like, no, I got this because this is my routine. Like I spend this much time every day. I would love to hear about how you manage your schedule with cosplay.
Okay, well, the discipline itself is kind of easy when, like you said, when you decide to do something and that whole thing becomes your world, and you get to a point where you aren't willing to compromise for certain things. And it's really difficult to be consistent, especially like if you move from one place to another in the middle of building, which is kind of what happened to me at one point during my very first build. I had to pick up everything and move from one place to another place, because I got the job in the middle of it. And
Hmm.
then on my second cosplay, I had to pick up and move in the middle of that one too. And there's a lot of people that happens to, and it's kind of disruptive. It's hard to be consistent, and I know that there's a lot of people who are in a lot better financial situation than I was whenever I first started, and they have to pick up and go. And like Ken Patsu cosplay just experienced this when she moved from South Africa to Canada. And people move for a lot of reasons, like maybe they're changing jobs. Like Allison Tabitha had to get a job because her Patreon, like, it was good and it was bringing in her money, but she wasn't making enough to pay her bills full time. So you have to get a day job, and that disrupts all the creative stuff that you're trying to do. Or if you're like Cult of Mayhem, I knew for a while she wanted to be a wrestler, and so
Hmm.
she had moved out to West Texas and was chasing her dream, and then got injured and had to move back home. And that's a really hard thing to do and to balance everything out.
I think you do a great job with everything that you have to balance. And you know, I guess there are a few people who are up to the challenge, and I can say it this way: there are a lot of people who talk about these things online, in different spaces, and they market the heck out of it, and they talk about doing all the hard stuff. But what I don't hear these folks say is that they do the hard stuff while they have a full-time job, and while while they're trying to pay a lot of bills and student loans and things like that. Like, usually they're doing one thing at a time. So I applaud you for taking on as much as you have. I mean, you're working full time, you're putting out content, like tons of content. You've got everything that's going on with cosplay. I mean, it's not just the creation, but yeah, it's also competing with it. It's so much, and I know, there's a balance to all of that. There's balance, and certainly you would want to consider self-care, within, um, with everything that you do, and just the sense of overwhelm that can be built with everything going on. I can speak from personal experience. So I'm sure that there is a little bit of overwhelm here and there for you.
Oh
But
yes.
how do you keep how do you balance it all out?
Um, well, it's a struggle, and I'm still figuring a lot of it out. I don't hide the fact that I have a full-time job. Um, a lot of people don't know that I also have a part-time job on top of that,
Um,
and I still have to work out and then bathe and eat, and I usually don't get home until really late. Like sometimes I don't get home until 11 o'clock, and it's
okay.
crazy, right? And I may only get 3 hours a day to work on a cosplay and like 20 hours on a weekend if I'm not at a con or if I don't have to go see my mom or um, dog sit for my sister, something like that. And when I tell people it takes me 2 weeks to make a costume, what I mean is that it's 70 to 100 working hours, which when condensed is only like 3 or 4 days.
Mhm.
Um, which wouldn't be, it's not that big of a deal for other people. Like I know the only other person I know personally who does 3 day builds is a cosplayer named Zia Cosplay, and she's fortunate enough that her day job allows her to do that. And if you're like me and you're a cosplayer who competes, you still have to document and make sure that you have all of that for the record. And then you still have to post it to social media and build exclusive content for your Patreon, which Zia's also really good at. And there's another cosplayer named Rona who works a full-time job and just launched her Patreon for makeup tutorials and behind the scenes stuff.
And that's
But
she's at
yeah,
Rona Cosplay.
at Rona Cosplay, it's Rhona. Don't forget the H, it's silent, right? Silent but deadly. Um, but none of us have children either, like Mariana, um, who's online as Mary Anna Lowry. She's a makeup artist, professional, does birthday parties, everything like that.
Mhm.
And then there's Chris T. Havoc. It's Chris.T.Havoc, and Chris is spelled Krys. She's like a boudoir um, person, and she has an adults and a fans only that you can get involved in. And then there's Awful Rose too, who is a wig, a, like a wig consultant slash like wig model, and she's really into like eyelashes, and she teaches people how to do certain like makeup things. I know a lot of makeup artists. I'm just realizing that. Um, but no, they all have kids, and kids are a blessing, but they require a lot of time. And these women are just rocking it uh, with their personal lives and taking care of their kids and making sure
Mhm.
that they have content. And that's inspiring just to have so much going on. And I try to do the same. And my mom always says that the women in our families are like carbon. If you put us under pressure, we produce diamonds. And I think that's what I do. I'm a professional diamond maker.
I happen to agree. I do think that, and really, anybody listening, make sure I'll put as much in the notes as I can for all of these people that we mentioned. But yeah, find them online. They really do some extraordinary things. I mean, just like Chelsea, creating these sort of just diamond cosplays and content. It really does, and it's yeah, it's too bad that it does require extreme pressure to do.
Yeah.
um, but it always comes out so well. One instance of where it really did come out well was Beaumont Comic Con. Um, if you wouldn't mind talking about, you were actually you were a guest and a judge at the event.
Hmm.
So you were part of the panels, and it was actually pretty epic. Everything that went on. Um, could you walk us through the show and how all of that got together?
Yes, I wish I would have gone and re-looked up some of the information because I can't remember the host's name. But it was Beaumont's first Comic-Con ever, and I was a guest judge in a panel, and they were nice enough to give me a table for me to set up and have people come by and take pictures and sign autographs for people. We had four panels. The first one I was actually supposed to do with Mariana Lowry, but she got called away at the last minute, and I had to improvise. Like she sent me her notes, and I had to improvise without the PowerPoint that she normally gives, and it was good. It had maybe like 7 to 10 people in it, which actually allowed me to calm down a bit because I was worried that people weren't able to find the room. They had forgotten to put up signs and point people into the direction, and so at one point I had to go and like, oh, make an announcement, tell everyone it's over here, and then people started to show up, and it became like a big success. As I mean, for my first panel, like 10 people was a lot. um, so we talked about like getting started with makeup and how to make your face stand out, like with contouring and like contacts and foam that you could glue to your face with spirit gum and stuff. And then I did a second panel with Red Aries 41. You could at Red Aries 41 on Instagram. Um, she always says that she's an amateur handler, which a handler is somebody that follows you around the con and makes sure that you eat and drink and go to the bathroom, and that when you're overwhelmed people stand back, and she gets aggressive with people so that you don't have to be. Right, that's her job is there to protect you and make sure that
Mhm.
you have everything that you need. And like I said, she's always like, I'm an amateur, and I'm like, no, you handle yourself as a professional. The way that you are is great. You're going to do this panel with me, and you're going to see that what you do is more important than you think. And that one was actually more popular than the makeup panel. And they had a lot of people ask some really good questions. And at the end of it, I was like, do you want to do that again? And she was like, yes, I want to do that again. And this is great. So we'll do that panel again in the future. And then the next panel was about Cosplay 101, which was basic materials and genres, and we covered everything from EVA foam to Warbler, and from closet cosplays.
Closet cosplay. Yes.
If we can get my tongue out of the closet, that would be good. Um, and all the way up to the more risque stuff, which there
Mhm.
were a couple of younger kids in the room. And before I mentioned those topics, I looked at the parents and I was like, is it okay if I talk about these more risque things? And they're like, yes, it's okay. And then I went on and I talked about um, burnt nerdlesque and all those boudoir photo shoots, and briefly mentioned that people sometimes take nude photography and then cut it off at that, um, and let them ask some questions. And even the kids were asking questions about, oh, I'm just getting started. Where should I start? And it's like, if you don't have a lot of money, then maybe you want to do closet stuff. Like just pull things out of your closet and make costumes out of that. And then the very last panel, I talked about how I make my own costumes and stuff like that. Um, and then the judging was kind of, it's not new. It's not my first time judging, but it was my first time judging a huge show, which I didn't expect the show to be this big. There was like, I think there was like 30, 40 people, and I only expected there to be like three or four people.
Oh, that's great.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize how popular cosplay was going to be in Beaumont.
But yeah, it has grown a lot in the last couple of years, and I'm always encouraged that that it is drawing crowds, that people are getting more involved with it and paying attention. There's so much that goes into it. Speaking of something that a lot goes into, you put together one piece called Vapor. I'm going to say this wrong. Vaporeon. Vap
That's right.
Vaporeon. Oh, okay.
Yes, that is right.
I got lucky.
Yay!
Um, was this a piece that you used the starburst method on? It's kind of like your method of how you go through and how you create a cosplay and a costume, or was it did you do something different while you were building it? I guess as much detail as you would like to give on how you put that together would
I
be awesome.
Yes, whenever I do talk about the way I do things in public, I do call it the starburst method, just because I feel like there's a star that's like in everybody, and we're all trying to illuminate the world and stuff like that. But I think and the only reason I'm able to build my costumes in such a small amount of time is that I do all of my research so far in advance. Like if I'm using something new, then I want to make sure that I know its ins and outs. And for Vaporeon, I watched all the Pokemon episodes that included this little pocket monster, this little ocean pocket monster, because I think getting involved in the fandom is just as important. I think it's
Mhm.
hard to cosplay something if you don't understand why people are obsessed with it. um, and so I read a bunch of books and watched a lot of documentaries and movies about like Greece and Rome and Sparta since our it was part of a group, and the group was trying to mash this ancient culture with EVs. And I did kind of the same thing with Donna Troy, and I read The Making of Wonder Woman, the book that came out after the movie, since it had a lot of reference materials.
Mhm.
And the design for Donna was different since it was all EVA foam. It's easier to work with, and Vaporeon is all Warbler, and it's a thermoplastic that I really love to hate.
It always looks great.
It looks
But yeah,
great.
it gets kind of melty, I'm told.
Yes,
It can be tough to work with.
it's melty, and it gets air bubbles, and you have to poke the air bubbles and smooth everything out. It's such a frustrating material that at one point, like I threw my helmet in the trash, and I cried about it because I couldn't get it right. But after a while, it's just like I went and I pulled it out and I kept working, because I knew that all of that was gonna everything that was wrong with it was gonna be covered up, right? And I have to be inspired. Which is why I have a bunch of Pinterest boards. I'm a maniac with all my boards, and I'll just like throw everything that I like onto a board, and I'll sort through the mess later as I work on my concept and like my ideas. And they're born out of things that I learn and I feel while I'm working on the project. Like it doesn't make sense to give Vaporeon a huge set of armor because this little pocket monster is like graceful and it swims and it can meld into the water and disappear. And it doesn't, when you look at it in the anime, it doesn't have a ton of like protection. It doesn't have steel plates, and heavy armor would just make it like, in reality, if this thing was in the ocean and it had a bunch of heavy armor, it would just sink to the bottom. And I don't know a whole lot about the physiology of a Vaporeon, but obviously it can like breathe air, but will it drown if it stays underwater? I don't know. So I'm trying to like make sure that the concept matches with the idea that I'm presented with on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And the the Vaporeon has all these like soft shapes paired with all these hard spikes, and that's a challenge to balance out. And for Donna, which I contrast it with that suit a lot because one's Warbler and one's foam. Um, I drew on Brett Booth's designs for the DC Rebirth series and the Lindy Hemming designs for the Wonder Woman movie because I wanted to emphasize that like Donna was like Diana, but they're two different people. So all her motifs are snakes instead of dragons. And like dragons and snakes are cousins, they're related, but they're not the same. And like I was very adamant that the chest piece light up because I've never seen that before for a Donna Troy cosplay. And I knew that I wanted there to be 52 lights because the new 52 series had just happened and they were just launching into Rebirth, and it had to be the cinematic feel because the movie was coming out. And all meshing all these ideas together is things that I learn about in college, and it's like wherever you can add meaning you should do it, whether it's a Pokemon pocket monster or a demi goddess, whatever you want to call her, depending on her like resurrection life at the time, right? Because wherever you can add meaning, it just enhances the story that your art can tell.
So you
Yeah.
you put the final touches on. Um,
Yeah, yeah, once I have all of my concepts ready, like I'll start making drawings and notes. And as things form in my head, I'll start buying items that I think I need. And I'm usually really good at knowing how much to order because my mind is just so obsessive with its calculations. I'm not good at math, but it's just so obsessive that I'm good at estimating how much I'm going to need and buying it. And this, even if I do underestimate, I always make sure that I have time to buy some more stuff. That's like calculated like in there. Um, I've always make sure that I know where the nearest um, craft store is, what their hours are. I'll make sure, does this store sell it? Does that store sell it? Which one's going to be open on this day that I'm going to have available? Um, and if they aren't local, I'll make sure that I know the shipping rates and the shipping times. And I think one of the critical things is that I can't I can't have too much time to work on something, but then I can't have too little time to work on something either
mhm.
because I kind of have a short attention span. I feel that if I get bored with something, then I want to move on to something else. And I will tend to start this big project and then, oh look, shiny object, and I'll start working on the shiny thing and then realize that my time for the big project is running out and I'll procrastinate, and then to catch up, I don't sleep, which we were
Mhm.
talking about that earlier. Like will I will stop sleeping to meet my deadline, or I'll only get a couple hours. And that usually means that I'm putting the final touches on the cosplay as I'm walking into the judge's room to be judged. And
Wow.
I have to tell the judge, like, I literally just finished this. And it's enough to drive a normal person crazy. But diamonds take time and pressure, and I've got both.
Yeah, I mean the anxiety, like when you get right to the moment of, and all of the anxiety and pressure that we've mentioned and talked about that could come up. Um, how does how does that work for you, to be able to balance that and to be able to work through it and handle the response that you're feeling? Because what I've heard, and you can disagree with me if you like, is that there's excitement and anxiety are actually the same. It's just that the concept, the context is different. So if you tell yourself that you're excited, with what you're doing versus you're anxious, like, oh gosh, I'm dreading this, that you get a different outcome, even though it's really this, it's almost the same feeling. But I would like to hear about like how you handle that in those sort of high pressure moments right before you go on stage and like what you do. So it's very interesting to hear about.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the whole anxiety and excitement thing because I, in college, I took a biology class and the teacher made a point to tell us that everything is relative. Like if you're in a cold room and then you walk outside and it's 100 degrees, it feels hot. Like say the room is 75 degrees and you walk outside and it's 100 degrees, it feels hot. But if you walk from a room that is a different temperature into something that's cooler, like it's relative, right? You're
Mhm.
not it's like they do the whole thing where you stick your one hand in something really really cold and so one thing in something really really hot and then you put them in like a neutral bowl and it feels like one's on fire and then the other like they both experience the same like level, right? So it doesn't.
Mhm. It's like sitting in somebody. It's like when you're sitting in your chair and you get out of
Mhm.
your chair and you come back to your chair. How does it feel? It's cold, right?
Yeah.
But when someone else sits in your chair, what's usually the thing that they say when you come and see them? I've been keeping your chair warm for
Good
you.
for
And then
you.
they
Yeah.
get up out of your chair and you sit back down in the chair and it always
Yeah.
feels warm,
Yeah.
which is weird.
Your analogy was better than mine. Mine wasn't very well organized,
Oh
but
no, it was perfect. It was perfect. Yours was much more scientific. Mine isn't based on anything.
well, I try to be logical about things. But as far as like being anxious and being like quote on people, oh, how does it feel to be on all the time? And I feel like people are really good at distinguishing me from my characters or the character that I'm wearing. So I'm never really like on, I'm never really performing for anybody. And part of that is I cosplay characters that I identify with. If I don't feel anything for that character, I typically won't wear it. Um, but I always feel awkward whenever I'm the center of attention, which is weird because I'm the center of attention right now, kind of. Um, and so my heart like starts racing, like even like knowing that later a million people are going to be listening to this podcast and they're going to like judge the sound of my voice, and if they're watching on YouTube they're going to be like, oh, why did she wear that shirt and her hair is green
Oh,
and like
what's wrong? There's
why
nothing.
what's like what's quote unquote wrong with her or whatever. Like you think about those things just because you're a human being, and human beings
Mhm.
like they want to fit in, and it's just a natural part of being alive and being human and experiencing this thing we call humanity. And it's a lot of stuff. And whenever I get into those situations, I'm like really hyper aware of it. And it's kind of just like, I've been told a lot that I'm uptight. And I think people mean just I can't relax sometimes. It's really hard. You just have to breathe. And it all reminds me like of the first time I started competing, and I I almost had a panic attack my first time because I picked the time slot on the last day of prejudging so that I could give myself the most amount of time to finish my costume, which at the time was Donna. Um, and I had stayed and working up on it till 4 a.m. and I worked on it until I completely ran out of all the supplies that I needed. And I went to bed like with a plan, going like I'm gonna wake up at 8 a.m. and everything's gonna be on this like razor edge. I have to get my supplies, I have to finish my costume by noon, by 12 o'clock. I have to drive 2 hours to the hotel and get everything set up in the hotel and be at judging by 4 p.m. And if anything goes wrong, I'm screwed. I'm just screwed, right? But everything worked out exactly like according to my plan. Um, and I entered the judging room, expecting there to only be 3 judges because normally, like I heard, like just watching um, people talk about things online about how many judges there typically are and stuff like that. I only expected there to be 3. And whenever I walked in, there's like 7 professional cosplayers, and they're not just nobodies. It's like Canvas Cosplay and Becca Noel and like all these people that like they're considered high ranking. Like everybody knows who these people are, and I'm just like, I start presenting my work, and I'm just like, I keep running out of oxygen because they stood up and then they're all hovering around me and they're asking me a million questions and it's really hard to keep up and I'm trying to tell them about the concept and the work and how I only get 3 minutes to tell them stuff and so time like runs out and the judges leave the room and like I'm on the verge of crying because I feel like I've done a bad job and the room attendant is just like standing there with her mouth open and I'm just like what like what did I do wrong and she's like they've been sitting in their chairs all day and like this is the first cosplay that they saw and they got up out of their chairs and they
Ooh.
started asking questions about it and I
Mhm.
was like oh my gosh, I just won my division. Like that's the moment I knew that I had just won my division. And of course, like when you start winning, everyone expects you to take home the trophy like every time, and that's not how it works. Just
Mhm.
the other day, someone was asking, or they were like, "Oh, you're gonna win Comic Palooza this year," and I was like, "I haven't even started on my costume yet." Like, don't say this. This is too much. And now with the coronavirus thing happening, the contest may not even be happening. So there's all these extenuating
Yeah.
circumstances, and you're not always prepared for everything.
Well, and yeah, there are some things that can come up that you just there's no way to prepare for them. I mean, you and maybe in some cases you wouldn't even want to because that would maybe impede progress. But if you're about 2 or 3 months out from a show normally, so Comic Palooza is like it's usually mid-year. Is that about
Yeah,
right?
May.
So at this point, where would you be with your like your con prep or your contest prep right now? So you're 3 months out from a show. How do you prepare for it from here?
Well, if we're talking about the costumes I'm working on now, normally I'm only working on one costume at a time, but right now I'm working on 2 at the same time. And some people they'll take months and months to prepare just for one costume, and that's not months of research for them. That's they have an idea and they start buying stuff and then they start putting it together. I like take those months, those first months, and I just obsess over all the details. It's like those people, those people typically are they're obsessing about what they're going to be doing on stage. And I'm not even there yet. Especially like the skit artists like Rumpelstiltskin and Eliana the Saint. Like
Mhm.
they're so amazing with like what they do and it's always a gamble for them since the stage size changes. Like if they have like a certain dance routine or something that they're doing, they can get screwed at the last minute if the size of the stage changes or if the DJ plays the wrong song. So it's what they do, I feel is like way more nerve-wracking than what I do. I never know what I'm doing on stage until the day of the contest, often like right before. Like I'll just be like, okay, well, we just saw the stage because they bring you through and they're like, oh, this is the stage. You come up on this side, you go up on that side, and then I'll like, okay, the stage is this big. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do this pose. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do this pose. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do this pose. And then I just run through those in my head over and over and again. Um, because I build my costume literally until the last second, usually right before I see the judges, and like my time leading up is always consumed with like concepts and crafting, and I just don't have the mental space to practice what's going to be on stage like some of the other people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the whole reason that we judge people and allow ourselves to be judged is so that we can learn new things. And like we, as artists, we love to learn, and we learn so that we're more successful.
We come to the end of the show. It's always a little bit sad, but I always have a few questions that are a little off center for my guests, and usually they're good sports about answering them. So I hope that you will be too, Chelsea. Nothing too scary.
Dun, dun,
Um,
dun.
if, the first question I have are, what are your top two money saving tips for cosplay?
Okay. If you can, I would buy secondhand closet cosplays, especially if that's your niche. Just like pulling stuff out of your closet and putting it together. You can buy a lot of really cheap like t-shirts and pants and stuff for like $2 each if you know where to go, like the resale shops. And I know a lot of people have their own issues with like Goodwill and stuff, but they actually have a lot of good stuff. And you can go through other people's toss piles. If you have a sister or a mother or grandfather or whatever, um, maybe know somebody that was in the army or whatever who's getting rid of a bunch of stuff, you can get all that stuff for free, or to toss a coin to your witcher and give them like a little hand back for giving you like whatever you've got coming your way. Um, and that'll be less stuff that ends up in the trash, less in the landfills, because you're going to be using it for something artistic that's not going to change just your life, but it's going to change somebody else's too who sees it. And I also thought about another one just now. It's like a lot of people, they can't buy foam
Mhm.
or Warbler just quite yet, but something that people have more than enough of is paper. So you can do this thing called Pepakura, where you can go and you can print out a pattern and then trace it onto paper, whether you glue a bunch of thin sheets of paper together, or you get old cereal boxes, or you make paper mache or whatever, but you can cut out these patterns and then piece them together and have um, a paper costume. And
Mhm.
there are people out there that make really, really badass paper costumes. I wish I could, like, my brain just can't remember anybody's names right now, that I want to plug. But there's really great paper artists. Just go out and look up cardboard costume or Pepakura costume, and you're gonna find a lot of really amazing artists. And there's like, I have another tip, but
Mhm.
it's not really about saving money. It's just like a word of caution. And it's not to make photographers angry, especially ones that like you want to get prints from to try to sell and make money maybe in the future. It's like people like Jorge and Jordan and Chris Key and like Jonathan Vilches and like Bocaholics, like who works with mineral blue a lot. Like they do all this stuff because they love photography, and because they're all in it because they love it and they all learn from each other. The group is really tight knit, and chances are if you burn a bridge with one of them, you're going to burn that same bridge with all of them. So if you're trying to get with photographers and get good deals with photographers so that maybe you and they can make money down the line, just don't even go there. Like, don't make them angry. Don't screw them over because you are going to lose out more than they will. So like, just don't.
Yep. So be nice to people is really
Yes.
the it's the moral of the story. Just be
Be
nice,
nice.
and
Be
it
nice.
it will work to your advantage most of the time, unless you have a handler who has to be a little bit forward with
Yeah.
someone. Usually, it's because they're not, somebody else is not being
Yeah.
nice. So,
Mhm.
uh,
A
and then
photographer is never going to not be nice to you, though. He's going to come up. A good photographer is going to come up and ask you, "Can I take your picture?" A bad photographer is just going to take a picture without your permission. And
mhm.
that's where you start getting into like the harassment stuff.
Yeah, it can get bad when people do that, and then yeah, there's really no place for it at all. I mean, yeah,
Always
always be
ask.
courteous. Always ask to take the photos. My next question, if I may, um, what upcoming film or series are you most excited about and why?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that I was really excited about. And then the coronavirus hit, and so now all the theaters are closed. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to just kind of weather out. But I typically like anything that has a good story or it involves emotions or just deals with psychology in a new way. WandaVision looks really cool. It's going to be interesting to see how that works, especially since it's behind a paywall, and I'm told that you have to watch it to understand the new movies that are coming out.
Oh, okay.
Um, so, but if you make me decide between building a cosplay or paying to watch something, I'm always going to pick my art.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about the Wonder Woman movie that's coming out, but they might end up postponing it like they've postponed a lot of movie releases. Um, and I thought it's going to be a nice reward for me to give to myself after building three massive costumes in the span of 5 months. And uh, that's just, I'm hoping that it's everything stays on track and then we get all of this coronavirus stuff nipped in the bud and I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
go, I can go. It would be really cool if that's the first movie I get to see after all this is done.
And yes, definitely need to take a little bit of a break sometimes and just reward yourself, relax. And yeah, I hope it's a really cool movie. I'm looking forward to that one too. My last question for you is, if you could make a positive impact on the world, what is it and why?
Mhm. Well, I'm not really under any grand delusions that anything I do is going to change the world, either positively or negatively. Really, like for myself, I'm striving to be everything I wanted to be when I was 10. Um, because I have nephews that are getting older, and I want them to believe in their dreams and to pursue them because there's so many people in the world who make it their mission to tell you that you're never going to make it or never make money, and that's just not true. Um, Not that money is the only reason to cosplay or do anything art related. And you don't even have to compete. That's not a requirement. I have an article about all the things that you get from competition on my blog. That's not money and not competing. And um, I think that a lot of people make it about all about winning and they forget everything else that you get out of it. Like cosplaying is almost like martial arts in that aspect is that you get confidence and you get like exposure and you get to make a positive impact on people. Like there's a lot of disabled cosplayers that make amazing cosplays and when they come on stage everyone loses their mind because they're just so brilliant.
Mhm.
Um, but even if your only goal is to make money and win, there's still a place for you. There's always a place for people in cosplay, and I'm just tired of people giving up on their dreams, and I hope that people will see me like building my cosplays to the best of my ability and competing despite my anxiety, and their souls will ignite, and I'll be like, yes, I can do that too. And like people that follow me, I call them my starbursts because like I want that fire to ignite and I want them to be passionate about what they're doing and like yes I can. Yes.
And that's so great. It's so great that you want to give back like that and see other people succeed. That's it's so good. Very good of you. Very good. Just a great mindset in general. Um, so where can we find you online, and how can we support you?
So I'm on all major social media as ChelseaM Cosplay. It's CHELSEA and then M, all one word to smash together. That's Instagram, Twitter, Vero, Facebook, Snapchat, and TikTok. I also just started a LinkedIn and I have a bunch of free Pinterest boards. Not that Pinterest charges you money, they're just public. When I say free, I mean public. A lot of
Mm,
public boards that have, there's a section of influence boards that have certain genres like medieval or Greek, Roman. There's a witchcraft one, there's one on forestry and nature and stuff like that. Just things to help people get inspired and maybe give them ideas. And then there's also cosplay boards, which are boards um, where I went ahead of you and I did all the hard work for you, looking for patterns and maybe ideas that you might not have thought about. Um, and then I have public idea boards. The idea boards are boards that when I went to make a certain costume, those were the ideas that I pulled from. So you'll
mhm.
get to see like what was inside my mind whenever I went to make whatever costume that was. And I also have a website, chelseamcosplay.com. It has a store on there. If you want to buy some of the prints, I would be more than grateful. And if you were looking for more like a blog type thing that was like a diary of how I was building things, you could check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ChelseaM Cosplay.
Yes, and definitely go check out the website, chelseamcosplay.com. It's very well put together. There's a lot of content. I mean, there's just tons of content that Chelsea puts out all the time. She is such a hard worker and so dedicated, and definitely, and certainly if you can um, support her on Patreon, it's definitely going to a worthy cause. So yes, absolutely thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you so much for everything that you shared, for all of your time, and certainly I hope we have the chance to follow up with you in the future to see what you are doing later on your next builds, and just how everything continues to grow and build for you. It's just so cool. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All
It was a
right.
pleasure.
Right. And everyone out there, this is Scotty B for Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary podcast, talking to ChelseaM Cosplay. Thank you so much, and bye bye.